Today sees the launch of a new magnetic filter system from Freewell. Now, this is not their first magnetic system, but it's surely their most ambitious. It essentially gives you 4 filters that you can then turn into 7. Now, a few quick disclaimers before we take a look at this. Firstly, this filter set has been sent to me for free by Freewell ahead of its release for me to test out, so a big thank you to them for that. And for total transparency, along with these filters, they've also supplied me with an affiliated link to them. So if anybody purchases these filters through the link in the description, then I will earn a commission. But as always, this is going to be an honest and unbiased review. So the idea of a magnetic filter system is, rather than having to constantly screw and unscrew endless filters on and off your lens, you instead just screw on the one base filter that has no optics to it, and then all of the magnetic filters can then be quickly attached to it. Now, as I mentioned, this system comes with 4 separate filters. The first up is a circular polarizer. Now, this one works like any other circular polarizer. You attach it to the front of your lens, you can then rotate it 360 degrees, and as you do so, you will see a polarizing effect. Next is an ND32 CPL, which works exactly the same way as the regular CPL, but whilst giving you a polarizing effect, it also reduces the amount of light by 5 stops, so you can then get longer exposures. Now, both of these filters attach to the outside of the main base adapter. However, there's an indentation in the middle of the adapter which allows you to mount one of 2 smaller filters. The first of which is a VND base. Essentially, this is a polarizing filter. There's a small notch on the top of these with a marker on them and a corresponding marker on the adapter, so it shows you where to mount it correctly. There's then also an indentation which gives you room to get your nail in behind the notch to then remove the filter when you want to. Now, this VND base by itself isn't really going to do much because it's basically a polarizing filter that you can't turn. However, if you place one of the larger CPL filters over the front of it but in reverse, you now have a 2 to 5 stop variable ND filter. And thanks to a small notch on one side of it, it means that it gives you hard stops at the 2 and 5 stop marker. And it's a similar story with the ND32. If you mount this in front of the VND base filter, you now have a 6 to 9 stop variable filter. Then we come on to the other smaller insert filter, which is a mist filter. These will diffuse any light source in your scene and give your picture a generally softer and more dreamy look. So this can mount in the adapter by itself and work as a regular mist filter, or if you add one of the larger CPLs in front of it, you then end up with either a 2 to 5 stop or a 6 to 9 stop mist variable ND filter. So that's 7 different combinations from 4 filters, which is pretty versatile. However, in terms of performance, I found it to be somewhat of a mixed bag. First of all, these filters don't appear to add any corner shading to your images, at least not at 20mm, which is the widest focal length that I have to test these on. Now, I believe this lack of shading is thanks to the sheer size of these filters. This is a 67mm system, and yet these front filters look closer to 82mm in diameter. So, on the one hand, it's good that they don't present any obvious vignetting, but it does also make the front of the lenses much larger, which for a lot of people could take away from one big advantage of magnetic systems, in that you don't need to remove the base ring from the lens. Now, you can leave this adapter on the lens, and they even supply you with a magnetic lens cap to cover the front of it when you're not using it. But in being so much larger than the lens, it means there's no hope of you using a lens hood, and it could also make storing the lens and camera a little bit more challenging. Now, in terms of optical performance, the polarizers by themselves work very well. They don't impact on sharpness and they only cause minimal color shifting. When used in conjunction with the VND base as a normal variable ND, again, the sharpness remains excellent. However, there is a slightly more noticeable change in colors between the 2 different filters, but nothing that can't be fixed in post. The biggest disappointment with these, however, is that towards their extreme settings of 5 and 9 stops respectively, you do start to see uneven darkening across the frame, where 2 opposing corners will be very dark and the other 2 will be quite bright. It's not particularly noticeable at mid to long focal lengths, but it is very prominent with wider lenses. Now, it's not too much of a problem for the 5-stop filter because you could always just switch up to the 6-stop. But it could prevent you from potentially using the 8 to 9 stop settings, which could be disappointing for some people. Now, with the mist filter, I will be honest, this is the first time that I've ever tried one of these out, and I noticed a couple of peculiar traits which I don't know if these are characteristics of mist filters in general or just this one in particular. In some scenarios, I found the filter does create a little bit of a shift in perspective. It's only very marginal, you wouldn't really notice it unless you were comparing up side-by-side shots of filter versus no filter, but it was just something I noticed that I thought was very unusual. However, the biggest thing that I've noticed with this filter is that it does not respond well to shallow depths of field. If you're shooting with a very wide-angle lens or you're stopped down very heavily like f8 to f11 on an 85mm lens, or you're quite a distance from your subject, then the sharpness is very well maintained. However, with shallow depths of field, the filter creates so much distortion that it's almost impossible to get any sharpness. Your images basically become unusable to the point that they actually look out of focus. So the overall image quality is very good, but there are a couple of niches. Sharpness is well maintained provided you're not using the mist filter with a shallow depth of field. The ND filters don't respond too well to wide-angle lenses near their darkest settings, and the colours do move around a little bit. But overall, I think it's fair to say they're fairly reasonable shortcomings for a system that has so much complexity but can offer you potentially so much flexibility. But for some people, those niches will likely be deal breakers. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. If this system does fit your needs, then like I said, you can check them out through the link in the description down below. As always, if you have any questions or queries, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video or you found it helpful, then please consider hitting the like and subscribe button to help support the channel, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.